Hello, everyone. My name is Ann Noble. I am an actor and a playwright and a teacher and part of Antia's Theater Company and living here in Los Angeles. I apologize for the casualness of all of this, but we are in the quarantine. And I thought, in honor of just being real with what's going on, because that's always my theme for Shakespeare, being real. I thought I'd just be here and not try to put up any studio or anything, just to speak directly to you and share with you my experience over these many years of being a theater professional, being in school, how I approach a Shakespeare soliloquy. So I'm going to walk you through basically what I do. And if it works for you, if it makes sense, awesome. And if it doesn't, take what you need and keep looking. Because I have found when working on Shakespeare, it's absolutely best to grab as much information as you can, because I think we all learn a little bit differently. Some of us are visual, some of us are auditory, some of us are tactile. And so please take what works for you. I would encourage you, though, to try everything. I learned when I was older that so many of the things that I thought maybe I didn't need that. Turns out I did. So I would definitely encourage you to try everything, especially with Shakespeare, because I feel like there's so much, it's so big, it's so thick, there's so much to work with that you never know what's gonna work for you. And you never know what later is gonna work for you. There are a lot of things that worked for me when I was young that no longer work for me, being an old person, but also now that just different times through my life and different plays, different pieces, different characters, sometimes require different tools. So again, all these things are stuff you can put in your tool belt, and sometimes they don't work and sometimes they work great. So I just encourage you to always look for what's working for you, but to try everything. And I've found, sometimes I think something's not going to work and it totally works. So I'm going to be working on today, I'm going to use a specific soliloquy to show you what I'm doing. And we're going to be doing Julius Caesar. Hope you can see that okay. It's backwards on my computer. I hope it's not backwards for you. But Julius Caesar, I'm going to be working on Portia. And Portia has that large monologue in the second act. I'm going to do just a chunk of it, not the whole long thing, just because I feel like it's good to focus on a small chunk for really specific detailed work. So I'm just going to be working on the chunk. Let me give you the lines so you've got it. It is, let's see, Act 2, Scene 1. It's near the end of the scene. And I'm going to be doing lines 261, starting with Portia's "Is Brutus sick?" and ending on what looks like line 279. The line ends, "Even from darkness." So that's the chunk. So if you want to grab your copy, you can. So here is the frame of what I'm going to be doing. I kind of wrote it out so we can see, and I'll keep referring to this. So this is my Shakespeare soliloquy prep. There's three-step process. It's a three-step process there. Step 1 is the text. Step 2 is the action. And step 3 is, it's a little bit of a mystical spiritual step, and I call it freedom. And we'll explain when we get there. What am I, the royal we? We, I will explain when we get there. But we're gonna start with step 1, the text. It's in 3 parts. What am I saying? How am I saying it? And when am I saying it? Those are my sort of 3 markers that I do. So something that I find really helpful is to get myself print out or handwrite. Sometimes it's really great to handwrite out the Shakespeare monologue because you get it into your body and into your hand and helps you to memorize. I print it out like this, nice big font. I go for 16 point and also double spaced. So there's lots of space on the page so I can write. So I highly recommend you do that. So we are going to start with the first step, which is, what am I saying? Right? What am I saying? I started reading Shakespeare very young. I think I was in, I want to say 5th or 6th grade. So for some of you, you may be like, that's not that young. But for me, I was lucky that I had some teachers that were giving this to me before I really knew I wanted to be an actor and be in the theater. So I was pretty lucky I got this, but I remember like, what is this? This is crazy. I don't understand this language. It's too old. It's too weird. I don't get it. but I found that it started to unfold itself to me. And that's actually a line of Portia's. So the first thing we're going to talk about, so this is focus on text. We're just going to focus on the text. I call this the Shakespeare pregame, because there's certain things you have to do with Shakespeare that you don't have to do with a normal, a modern play or a modern monologue, or if you're auditioning for TV or film or commercials. It's like, oh, I get it. I know what I'm saying. But we have to do this pregame with Shakespeare. So I try to look at it as a little bit of like being an explorer. Like I'm in an unknown terrain and it's new and I'm not sure what it is, but because I'm walking on this journey, I get to name it. I get to discover it. So let's try and think of it that way. And one of the phrases I use, it's a little catchphrase that I use, and it's a text without a context is a sure sign you're being conned. So I'll say that again. A text without a context is a sure sign you're being conned. So what we're going to be doing through this first step with the text is taking the text and giving it context so that I know what I'm saying. And if I'm an audience member and I'm watching you perform, if you don't know what you're saying, then I don't trust you. Then I lean back, I'm like, they don't know what they're doing. But if you know what you're saying, I'm like, oh, what are they? They know what they're saying, I'm in, right? So I want to have my audience always be leaning in, right? So how do I do that as an actor? How do I get my audience to lean in? I have to know what I'm saying. So we're gonna start with the super basics. I'm sure some of you have heard this. What I'm going to do is I've printed out multiple copies of this Portia monologue, and I'm going to show you what I do kind of at each phase. I usually do it just all on one sheet, but for the sake of clarity, I put it on multiple sheets. So the very first thing in the what am I saying section is the meter. So you've all heard this, I'm pretty sure, but Shakespeare, for the most part, for the verse sections, and let's be clear, verse is when it's written like this, right? There are ends to the lines, right? So it's a form of poetry and it's iambic pentameter. So iambic means the feet. So 1 foot is an iamb. And that's, I think you've all heard, it's the heartbeat. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. And iambic pentameter is 5, penta, 5. So it's 5 beats, 5 feet, I should say, 5 feet, which is 10 beats, because each foot is 2 beats per line. So ba-bum, 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 right? So this is how I break it down. So what I do, I'm going to show you this up close, and again, hopefully it's not backwards. So see that where I put those accents? Is brute to sick, and is it physical? One line. Is brute to sick, and is it physical? Now, if I were to actually say the line like that, everyone would look at me like I'm crazy, right? They're like, what are you doing, right? Because this is just a tool. Like I said in the beginning, the meter is a tool for you. It's not telling you how to say the line exactly. It's telling you what Shakespeare's doing, what the playwright is doing with his language, with the meaning. So it's a tool for you to dig in there and see what this is all about. So I do this still. After all these years, I still do this with every speech, with every line. Now, if it's prose, if it's a prose section, I don't really worry about it. I still listen, but I don't really worry about it. But if it's verse, I do this every time. So, is brute to sick, and is it physical? To walk unbraced and suck up the humors. Oops, that doesn't line up, does it? So we want to look at that. So the first thing we want to do is look for anomalies. Look for what's different. So what is a line in the speech that doesn't end right? So is brute to sick, and is it physical? To walk unbraced and suck up the humors. There's an extra foot there. There's an extra little, well, not a foot, an extra little beat, right? So I take note of that. So that's what that dash is. I take note of that. And again, this is for you. This is not the right way or the wrong way to do Shakespeare. This is so for you can go, Shakespeare's saying something because it's different. And then we keep going. Of the dank morning, what is brute to sick? Okay. And will he steal out of his wholesome bed to dare the vile contagion of the night? and tempt the roomy and unpurged air, to add unto his sickness no my Brutus. Oops, okay, there's another anomaly. So I've made a little note. Now, so you want to make notes. In this speech, there are 4 lines that don't add up. So to walk unbraced and suck up the humors, to add unto his sickness know my Brutus. A little further down, I charm you by my once commended beauty. And the last one, second to last line, some 6 or 7 who did hide their faces. So what that tells you is there's something different about those lines. There's something that Shakespeare wants to pop up. There's something Shakespeare wants you to take note of. So that's what I do. So maybe he's saying he wants the line to take a little longer. Maybe there's a little more stress on that last word. I don't know. We're not Shakespeare. We don't know what he meant, but we know that he wanted us to take notice, right? In the same way, if you're exploring a countryside and it's all green, this green hill, you're looking up and all of a sudden there's a dark patch, that's something to take note of, right? You're like, ooh, dark patch. Now maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but you don't know, but take note, right? Then the other thing we want to look at is these words that have the EDs on the end, right? So you heard that I said unbraced, right? Not unbraced. Now we'll talk about the meaning of that word later. And I said unpurged. Where is that? Unpurged air. There it is. And then down here, we've got commended. Now commended, that's how I would normally say it in modern times. Like I would just say, oh, I'm being commended to my Lord. I mean, I wouldn't say that in modern times, but that's the way the word's pronounced. So we want to ask always with those EDs. Now, sometimes you'll get a version of Shakespeare where you'll see an apostrophe. So say Shakespeare wanted you to say that unbraced. They would take away the E, right? So it'd just be unbrace with a little apostrophe D, so you'd know, oh, unbraced. But some versions don't do that. Like this version I printed out from MIT, I think is what it is. They don't do that. So you have to know. So the way I know to say unbraced is the meter. To walk unbraced and suck up the humors. Now, even though that line is an anomaly, if I said to walk unbraced and suck up the humors, it doesn't work. So that means Shakespeare wants me to say unbraced. And here, and tempt the roomy and unpurged air. No, and tempt the roomy and unpurged air. Now, this is something I feel is kind of, you want to sort of commit to this. A lot of things of Shakespeare you can play what I call a little jazz with. If you don't want to do the line exactly in the meter, that's okay. But for these EDs and these Ds, it's a good rule of thumb to stick with what Shakespeare asked you to do. Just to, not always, but I would say 99.9% of the time, go for it, okay? So the other thing that the meter teaches you is sometimes there are words that Shakespeare wants you to stress out, lengthen. So for example, down here, which did incorporate and make us one, okay? Incorporate. Well, if I was gonna say that normally, I'd be like incorporate. I would just kind of squish it all together, which did incorporate and make us one. But listen to this, which did incorporate and make us one. That means there's something very important about that word. Shakespeare wants me to stretch it out, which did incorporate and make us one. So again, just to take note of, Shakespeare's giving you a little clue like, hello, might want you to do that word like that. Another one is this very first line, physical. Is Brutus sick and is it physical? I wouldn't say it like that. I'd say physical. I just kind of throw it out there, right? Physical. Shakespeare wants us to stretch it out. Is Brutus sick and is it physical? There's something about that word he wants us to put out there. And so we're going to talk about meaning a little bit later, but I just want to give you a note on that. Then on the flip side of that, what are the words he wants shortened? Maybe there's some words he wants shortened. Like I think this one is interesting. To, let's see, to dare the vile contagion of the night. Now it's not contagion, it's contagion. He's shortened it a little bit. So to dare the vile contagion of the night. So that tells you that Shakespeare doesn't want that word stretched out. He wants it kind of just as it is, just to take note of. Another one is heavy. Oh, this is a longer one, sorry. Why you are heavy and what men tonight. So not heavy, heavy, heavy. He's giving it some space and some weight. So these are just some fun things to look at. And again, I also want to point out, aside from those EDs and those kind of stretched out or truncated words, the rest, again, just suggestions to take note of. So for example, the why you are heavy. If you follow the iambic pentameter, it's why you are heavy. Why you are heavy and, right? Why you. Now, for me, when I do this monologue, I think the why is a bit more important. The not you. Now, Shakespeare may be saying to me, I think the you is more important, but I think the why is more important. So I choose when I do this monologue to stress the why. But it's really good, again, to look at what Shakespeare meant here, why you are heavy. What that says to me, that Brutus isn't heavy. That normally, what's interesting is he's heavy. That means he doesn't carry burdens like this. So it's an extraordinary circumstance. So you see how the meter is actually giving us some meaning here. So again, to take note of, that doesn't mean you have to say it that way. It just means there's meaning there. There's something Shakespeare saying, hey, look at this, right? And then the other one I think is interesting is up here in the beginning. And will he steal out of his wholesome bed? So it's not the he that's important and not the and that's important. And it's will and steal. It's interesting, right? Will he steal? Again, why does Shakespeare want those words stressed? Maybe because Brutus is an honorable man and he doesn't steal. And so Portia's using those words specifically to maybe get a reaction out of him. So again, these are all kind of fun things that you can look at, right? To see what Shakespeare's trying to say. All right, so that's the meter. And yeah, and so again, just if the odd sentences right at the very end, some 6 or 7, who did hide their faces? Doesn't fit the meter. So maybe those faces, that's a really important word, right? Okay, so I'm gonna set the meter page down and now we're gonna move on to the other part. We are still in this section. What am I saying? Okay, we're still here. So the next one I want to focus on is the actual sentences, okay? Sorry about that. Okay, so this is the part where you have to look at sentence structure. Okay, so this is the boring part. This is the grammar part. This is like, what are my nouns and verbs, adjectives, adverbs, sentences. So this is my other page here. So now what I do, and again, I do this every time. So the first thing we're going to talk about, I was checking my little notes there, is the ends of sentences. Where do the sentences end? So these big jagged lines, those are my sentences ends. So, is Brutus sick? That's a sentence. That's a sentence. Is Brutus sick? Now, here's what's interesting. In this version, you see there's a question mark there. So this version of Shakespeare, this editor has decided that what is Brutus sick is one sentence. What happens when I look at my other little book here? What do they have? They have a comma. I don't know if you can see that. Is Brutus sick and is it physical to walk? So they think it's part of the other sentence. What do you do? What do you do? Well, what I do, I choose, I make a choice. What do I want to do? I've got a couple options. Is Brutus sick and is it physical to walk unbraced and suck up the humors of the dank morning? I can say it like that. Or I can say, is Brutus sick? And is it physical to walk unbraced and suck up the humors of the dank morning? They both apply. You can do both. And again, that becomes an acting choice. Like, what's more important for me? Is it more important that I push through that sentence? Is Portia needing to say all this at once? Or is it important to say that first thing like, hey, are you sick? You know, we'll talk about that a little bit later. So I go through the whole thing and break up those sentences. Now, this is really important. There are a couple different schools of thought on this. Some scholars and teachers think it's really important to pause at the end of every line. They think honoring the verse is very important. I am not one of those teachers. I think it's an interesting exercise. My problem with it is I think it doesn't help us to hear the meaning of the text. So to our modern ears, it's confusing. And I believe that the most important thing for Shakespeare and a modern audience is clarity. You honor the text, you honor the words, you honor Shakespeare's meaning. But if your audience doesn't understand what you're saying, what's the point? So that's my thing. Not to say don't try, I mean, go ahead, try it. It's really cool. Like, you know, you can do, is Brutus sick? And is it physical? Little breath. To walk unbraced and suck up the humors of the dank morning. You can totally do that. For me, again, I think it can trick our ear and make it a little confusing. So I go for the whole thing. I keep talking. Is Brutus sick? Question mark. And is it physical to walk unbraced and suck up the humors of the dank morning? I keep going. So I mark all these sentences. So look what that means for that next sentence. What is Brutus sick, comma? Now, I've got other versions that have that as a question mark. And then there's a new sentence. What is Brutus sick, and will he steal out of his wholesome bed to dare the vile contagion of the night and tempt the rheumy and purged air to add unto his sickness? Whoa, big sentence, right? So this is also going to tell you where you're going to need to take your breaths. Now, a lot of us say, oh my gosh, these long sentences, I can never talk in a long sentence, blah, 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 right? Okay, I'm telling you, you do this all the time. In your real life, if something important has happened to you or something shocking and you're relaying a story to your friend, I guarantee you talk in a long sentence. You'll be like, oh my God, I went to the store and I couldn't believe it. I saw this guy that I hadn't seen in so long, and there he was, and he was like buying milk. And I was like, oh my God, I thought he was a vegan. And look what I just did, blah, 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 blah. No breath. The important thing is if you know what you're saying and you know you're getting to the end of that line, you're not gonna have to take a breath, I guarantee you. But it's important to mark your breaths, and we'll do that a little bit later. So in this section, we're still talking about sentences. So mark all your sentences, where the ends of them are. So I've done that, right? Okay, the next thing, subject, verb, object, right? So we all know what that is, right? I go to the store. I is the subject, go is the verb, and to the store is the object. Or I hold the paper. I, subject, hold, verb, the paper, object. So Shakespeare does this weird thing sometimes. He puts the objects first sometimes. Sometimes he does that. Now, this speech doesn't really have a lot of that, but sometimes Shakespeare will do things like, the paper I hold. So just be aware of that. Sometimes you're looking at it, you're like, I don't understand the sentence. See if perhaps the object is coming first. So that's a good thing to take note of. So what I do, and you can see it, I literally write in, see that little V, because it's a question. S for Brutus is Brutus sick, verb, subject, object. So now this next sentence here, and is it physical? So physical is actually the subject of the sentence. Now see all these circles? It's all the verbs. These are all the verbs. Is it physical? To walk, unbraced. Walk, I've circled. Suck up the humors. So see, to walk unbraced. So what I'm teaching myself is how this sentence is structured. Physical, to walk unbraced, subject, verb, object, and suck up the humors of the dank morning. Suck up is the verb. The humors of the dank morning is the object. I do this, look at this, all the way through the whole thing. Where are my verbs? Where are my subjects? Where are my objects? Always, always, always. Verbs are really important in Shakespeare. You need to know where your verbs are. Also, are your verbs split? Like, will he steal? Will and steal, that's part of the same verb. So you'll see I've got these kind of double circles, right? So I've got to dare, not dare, to dare, that's the verb, right? So then the other thing I do is the parentheticals. What is a parenthetical? A parenthetical is a part of a sentence that you can take out of the sentence and the sentence will still be okay. So for example, let's do it right here. So she says, no, my Brutus, you have some sick offense within your mind, which by the right of virtue of my place, I ought to know of. So you can take by the right and virtue of my place out of that sentence, and it still makes sense. No, my Brutus, you have some sick offense within your mind, which I ought to know of. So I put parentheses around that line so that I know that is a sentence within a sentence. That's going to affect my vocal quality. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but that's going to affect my vocal quality, okay? So, for example, you have some sick offense within your mind, which, by the right and virtue of my place, I ought to know of. You're going to want to change your voice a little bit there so that you know, and you let me know, the audience, that it's outside the sentence. We need that with our ear. And we do it all the time. Again, that little story about going to the store. Oh my God, I went to the store and I saw my friend who I used to have a crush on, and he was buying milk. I do it all the time. So look for it in your daily life. When you explain something a little bit more, you change your pitch. You do it all the time. So again, a lot of this Shakespeare stuff is actually pointing out stuff that we already do. We don't think we do it, but we do it. Okay, so I think that's it for sentences. Oh, the other thing is what belongs to what, okay? So this sometimes with these long sentences, it's kind of hard, like which belongs to which. So again, what I do is like, is Brutus sick and is it physical to walk unbraced and to suck up the humors? So to walk unbraced and suck up the humors of the dank morning, I need to know that of the dank morning belongs to suck up the humors, right? It's a description of those. And also then suck up and to walk belong to physical. So think of where things belong, especially with these long sentences. You're like, where does that go? What's that connecting to? Look for those connections. Subject, verb, object. Oh, that's a parenthetical. It's like a little extra sentence, right? So that's a really important thing, is to look at belongings. Another example is, and will he steal out of his wholesome bed to dare the vile contagion of the night and tempt the rheumy and unpurged air to add unto his sickness? So, does to add unto his sickness belong to stealing out of his wholesome bed? Or does it belong to dare and to tempt? You could go either way, right? It could be, and will he steal out of his wholesome bed to dare the vile contagion of the night and tempt the rheumy and unpurged air to add unto his sickness? Or is it, and will he steal out of his wholesome bed to dare the vile contagion of the night and tempt the rheumy and unpurged air to add unto his sickness? So you can play a little jazz in there. So think about belonging. What words belong to what? What sentences belong? And the other thing I really want to point out is repetition. Sometimes Shakespeare, a lot of times Shakespeare, repeats the same idea in a different way. And you need to know that, because in real life, if I'm saying, okay, here's an example. My water cup. This blue cup I got from my theater company. I'm repeating something. I'm saying it a different way, but I'm repeating, and you need to let us know, the audience, you're repeating, right? I'm repeating myself. So otherwise someone will think you're talking about something else and they get confused. So a really good example of this in here is down here at the bottom of this monologue. That you unfold to me yourself, your half. Yourself and your half are a repetition, twice, 2 repetitions of me. That you unfold to me yourself, your half. So me, I'm saying to my husband, I'm yourself, your half. I am all these things in addition to just me. This is what me means. So look for those repetitions. And as I'm saying this right now, I'm realizing, oh my gosh, that's why that word incorporate and make us one, Shakespeare wanted to highlight that. We're incorporate, we're together. Isn't that interesting? See, when you dig somewhere else, then you find an answer to something else. Okay, I think that's good for that section. So that's sentences. And again, I just also want to point out the differences in punctuation. So in this version, there's a comma here, which, by the right and virtue of my place. In my other version, there's not a comma. Down here, what men tonight have had resort to you, I have a colon, but in my other version, it's a semicolon. Now, a colon, a semicolon, a colon sometimes means the end of a sentence. And sometimes a semicolon will mean it's like a new sentence, but they're connected, so not full stop. But look at, again, the logic of the sentence. Where does the sentence end? Where do you need to take a breath? And how does it speak to you and the scene and what the character is going through? Again, these are all suggestions. And remember, we don't have exactly what Shakespeare wrote. These are adaptations, interpretations, different editors. A lot of times it was Shakespeare's actor friends that were writing down what they remembered. You know, think about a play you did several years ago. If you had to write it down, would you remember all the punctuation? Probably not. So again, these are tools to help you. Some people feel more strongly about punctuation than other people do. Again, I look at it as a tool, not as it's written in stone, but as a tool to help me. Okay, we are going to move on to the next section now. How am I saying it? How am I saying it, right? So I like to do something that is called scoring. Like in music, I score my script, especially if I have to do a reading. So it's not a full performance, it's just a reading of a play. I score my script, which means I am going to make notes for myself on how I'm going to speak. So here's an example of a scored script. Look at all that stuff, those little arrows, the quotations, those sentence lines, numbers, you see numbers, right? So this is how I help myself to know what I'm saying. I do this even if I'm going to be memorized and performing a script. Okay, so scoring, the sentences, where I'm going to end. So those big slashes are back there, you see? Is Brutus sick? Boom, end of sentence. I also have decided that know my Brutus down here, that's a full sentence. I'm not going to do know my Brutus, you have some, I'm going to pause. That's important for me. I'm going to end that sentence, right? Now, the next thing I do is then I mark where I keep talking. So remember how I talked about the end of the lines? So for me, see, I drew a little arrow here. And is it physical? Just keep going, keep going. And is it physical to walk unbraced and suck up the humors of the dank morning? Boom. What, is Brutus sick? And will he steal out of his wholesome bed? Keep going. Okay, see that. Now, you're also gonna see these arrows, ups. Okay, up arrows. This is what I call the setup. So remember how I said that sometimes Shakespeare does an object first. So if my sentence is, I hold the paper, and Shakespeare has written it backwards. The paper I hold. Do you hear what I did with my voice? The paper I hold. I need to let the audience know that this sentence is out of order so that I can understand it, right? So this paper I hold. So I do these little arrows to remind myself to go up. So for example, in this part, and upon my knees. So here we are, right? It's right after I ought to know of, and upon my knees, arrow up, I charm you. I want the audience to know I'm setting something up. Upon my knees, I charm you. Now, you don't have to like necessarily go all the way up, like in a question, like, what are you doing? Upon my knees, I'm popping the word up. I like to think in Shakespeare that instead of hitting a word with a hammer, so upon my knees, I like to think of tossing it up like a ball. Because when you toss up a word, the audience hears it, we take note. So upon my knees, hear how I'm doing that with the speech? I charm you, and I've got it again here. By my once commended beauty, by all your vows of love. Now what's that? That's a list, that's a repetition, isn't it? By my once commended beauty, by all your vows of love. I'm repeating it, I'm talking about our relationship. And so what have I done? I've written a number 1 and a number 2 for myself. So I know that's a list, that's a repetition. I charm you by my once commended beauty, more to say, by all your vows of love. Look, another up arrow. Right? Now, parentheticals, we talked about this, right? I put parentheses around things, which by the right and virtue of my place, so I know that's separate. I know it's a little bit different than the sentence. The other thing I do is I do the EDs, right? Braced, perged, so I remember. And I also do, this is about belongings, again, what belongs to each other. So I will put quotes around humors of the dank morning. See, I put quotes around there. So I know that belongs together. So that I don't say walk unbraced and suck up the humors of the dank morning. Humors of the dank morning. So in the way you air quote stuff, right? So when you say, oh, well, I went to the store, we know that means something else, right? So think air quotes, literally air quotes. Try not to do this when you're doing your speech, which I did once, which was very embarrassing, but I did it. But I didn't think they have air quotes in, you know, the 17th, 16th centuries. So here's another one. The vile contagion of the night. See, I put quotes around there. Here it is. The vile contagion of the night. So I know those all go together, right? So I remind myself when I see the quotes, oh, this all goes together. So don't break it up. The vile contagion of the night. The vile contagion of the night. And the other thing I want to talk about too is adjectives, nouns. Adjectives, nouns. Shakespeare likes to do this thing where he pairs an adjective with a noun. So for example, in here, dank morning, vile contagion, sick offense, once commended, great vow. See if there's a couple more. I think that's good for now. But so what I do, I put little hyphens. See, sick offense, vile contagion, dank morning. So I know they go together. Again, what goes together? So look for those little adjective noun combo platters, right? They go together. Lists, I do the 1 and the 2, right? So again, yourself, your half, 1, 2, and 3. So me is 1, 2, 3. Repetition 1, or repetition 2, repetition 3. And then the other thing is I call the am I word, the most important word in the sentence. What is the word? First line, physical. I've circled physical. And is it physical to walk on bracelet and suck up the humors of the dank morning? That's the most important thing for me. And again, this is for you. A lot of times it's the verb, like I've got, you have some sick offense within your mind, which by the right and virtue of my place I ought to know of. I've circled no, because I think that's the most important. Unfold to me why you are heavy. What men tonight have had resort for you, for here have been some 6 or 7 who did hide their faces. That's very important to me. Hide their faces. Their faces are hiding. Is Brutus sick? I've done. So again, this is how you score a script. And the reason I do this is so when I'm looking at this thing, I start to imprint the way I'm going to do this monologue. I start to get it in my mouth, build a habit. In the same way, if any of you play sports or play music, you know that you practice. So your fingers or your body, if you're playing basketball, it gets in it. You know, how, if you play basketball, you practice your layups, right? You don't want to be in the middle of a game thinking 1, 2, 3, jump, dunk. No, you want to be able to do it. So I practice it in my mouth, how I'm going to say it. So that's why I do this scoring. I do this for every monologue, soliloquy, scene in Shakespeare, every single one. I am old and I still do this. I've been doing this a long time and I still do this. Okay, so that's scoring. The other thing I want to point out, oh, one more thing, sorry, one more thing. Look for opposites. Look for opposites. We call them antithesis, but look for things that are opposite. So for example, is Brutus sick and will he steal out of his wholesome bed? Stealing, wholesome. Those are opposite things. Just to take note of, you may not want to pop them up. You may not want to highlight them. Like, I don't know if I would say, will he steal out of his wholesome bed? I might not do that, but I just want to draw your attention. Look for those opposites. Shakespeare does this all the time. I love and I hate. I love this, I hate this. Look for those. You want to know those are there and take care of them. Maybe toss them both up, right? Think about that. Okay. All right, so that is scoring. Now, we're still in the how am I saying it? Don't worry, the rest of this will go fast. Okay, so the next thing is, what do I have? Oh, sounds. Okay, so I like to do this with every single one of my soliloquies. I do the monologue a couple of times as if I'm speaking to a person who doesn't understand English. Okay, so if any of you have been to a foreign country or you're talking to someone who doesn't understand your language, you know how we do that really annoying thing where we talk too loud and we overpronounce the words as if that's going to help the person to understand the language? It's ridiculous, but we do it anyway. So I need to know what these sounds are like, right? So I overdo it. So for example, it's gonna be embarrassing, but this is what I do. Is Brutus sick? And is it physical to walk unbraced and suck up the humors of the dank morning? Okay, totally embarrassing, right? We're not gonna do a monologue that way. But see what it did to my mouth? Is Brutus, see how big my mouth got? I mean, I have a big mouth anyway, but is Brutus sick? And is it physical to walk unbraced and suck up the humors of the dank morning? Listen to those K's. Walk, suck, physical, dank, Brutus, sick. A lot of K's. Those are hard words. That tells you something about Portia. She is not afraid to say what's on her mind. Will he steal out of his wholesome bed to dare, bed to dare, the vile contagion of the night, and tempt the roomy and unpurged air to add unto his sickness? Tells you something. Do you have a lot of M's and N's in your speech? If you want to look at something really interesting, look at the difference between Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. I'm not in the theater, so it's okay. I can say Macbeth. Macbeth has a lot of M's and N's in his language, a lot of O's. If it were done, when 'tis done, 'twere well it were done quickly. The red sea, making the green one red, incarnadine. Lots of M's and N's and O's. It tells you something about him. Lady Macbeth, lots of short, sharp words. Look at it. It's really interesting, right? Same thing with, in Midsummer Night's Dream, Oberon and Titania. Titania. These are the forgeries of jealousy. Little sounds, little sparkle sounds. Oberon has these over sounds like O's and M's and N's. So look for that stuff. It tells you about character, because when you do that with your mouth, it starts to affect your body. So again, do that version. And really, if you're with a scene partner, it's super fun to do it back and forth, right? Like you both do it as if the other person doesn't understand what you're saying. And it's fun too, because it also gets your body involved. Like, is Brutus sick? It can be really fun. And I find it's important to have fun with Shakespeare. All right, so that's a little fun trick that we can do. Okay, we're moving to the next section now, which is, when am I saying it? You need to understand that this was written over 400 years ago. So there's going to be references here we don't understand. Things, words that don't mean what they used to mean, right? So, very first word, physical. Physical? Is that what he means? No. It actually means healthy, means healthful. So this is when you look up all the words you don't understand. So I have called this page, Words I Don't Know. So you want to look up these things. What words don't I know? I had to look up physical, because I don't think it means what it means now. It means healthy. To walk unbraced. Embraced, what does embraced mean? Well, embraced, the gentleman used to wear a doublet that had braces, ties. So unbraced means kind of his shirt is open. So it would mean unbuttoned. So it'd mean like a guy is walking around without his shirt buttoned up. And for a senator, Brutus is a senator, that's a little weird, right? That's like, why are you walking around like this? So to walk unbraced, suck up the humors. Humors? Humors are, they have a double meaning. Humors can mean dew, mist. So the humors of the dank morning, the dew, you know how when you get up in the morning, it's like kind of dewy. That's what she means. But also humors meant old doctors. They didn't know much about our bodies. They thought we had humors, different like moods. So like a humor could be, you have a humor of silliness and joy. You have this kind of humor, right? I have a bouncy Energizer bunny humor, right? That's my humor. Some people are kind of naturally a little more down. So it had kind of a double meaning. So humors doesn't mean like comedy, right? And then we also want to look up like roomy. Roomy and unpurged air. I don't know what that means. Roomy. So roomy means watery. So an eye, your eye would be roomy, a roomy eye, meaning it had like gunk in it. So obviously if your eye had water in it, that's not healthy, right? So it does mean not healthy, watery, the roomy and unpurged air. So watery air, that's not good. Unpurged. So to purge, right, means to purge, to get rid of. So in this set, it's the unpurged air. It's not purged, it's not clean, so it's unclean. So the air is like dirty. It's got stuff in it, right? Now, another one, right and virtue of my place. Right doesn't mean correct. It means a right, like a human right. Yeah. And even something like virtue. Like our modern day understanding of the word virtue is like virtuous people. They're super good. That's not what it meant back then. Back then, it really was a quality of living, like living honorably, like with dignity. So a virtuous person might say something that's kind of uncomfortable and you don't want to hear because they're virtuous. They speak the truth, right? It's not about being nice or being super goody two shoes, right? We use that phrase. That's not what it meant. So you need to look these things up. And something I really want to draw your attention to. So this whole when am I saying it? What was going on in the culture at the time? What do these things mean? So it's really important that as an actor, I communicate the meaning to the audience, the context. So the best example I can find at the end of this monologue, hide your faces even from darkness. This is really important in Roman society. So today, I mean, even in this quarantine, we're all wearing masks. So it's like a norm now. We wear masks. Back then, a Roman senator, you don't hide your face. It's part of who you are. It's part of your dignity. You are a Roman senator, which means you don't have to hide your face from anyone. You are who you are. You are your authentic self, and you can show yourself anywhere and no one can harm you. There's a thing in Rome that a Roman citizen could walk anywhere in the world and be protected by Rome. That's like thinking about like your passport now, right? Your passport as an American citizen. Now, we're living in a time where it's pretty, you know, it can get kind of scary being an American abroad or an Iranian citizen, you know, like think about that stuff now. But you want to think about being in a place and time where your citizenship protected you without the use of a weapon. So that was for Roman citizens and particularly a Roman senator. So for Portia to say to her husband, there were people here who hid their faces even from darkness, that really means something. These are people that hid their faces. They are not honorable men. And what are you doing as a Roman citizen, hiding someone who has to hide their face in our house? Something to think about, right? Okay, so that's really important. When are you saying it? Look up all these cultural references, do some research, ask some people, you know, do all that stuff. Okay, so now we've moved on to step 2, action. So I'm going to go through this kind of quickly because this is just basic acting stuff. So everything I just did, that's what I call the Shakespeare pregame. You need to know all that stuff just to get to ground zero so you can start doing your acting work, right? So I'm just going to give you real quick what I do as an actor. So 2 things, action. Why am I saying it and where am I saying it? Those are the 2 most important things. So for me, why am I talking right now? Why am I speaking? Okay. So for me, I'm going to give you a rundown. Who am I talking to? Real basic. Who am I talking to? Talking to my husband. Portia's talking to her husband. He's a Roman senator. And in that culture, I am considered an equal of his. Now, as a woman, I do have a little bit lower status, unfortunately. And I know that still does apply today. Some places, women have lower status. And that is true in this culture. However, Brutus and Portia, they considered themselves like symbiotic. They were one unit. And that the bond of marriage made you one. It made you together. So that's really important to know. So who am I talking to? I am talking to someone I can tell anything to. My husband. Very important. The next thing is, why now? Why am I saying it now? So who am I talking to and why now? So the why now has 2 parts. It's why now? Okay, my husband has been annoyed and scary and weird and acting weird, and he's not like that normally. So I need to say something to him. But even more specifically, why right now? So why now? Because things have been weird for a while and I'm going to choose to come in and talk to him. But why right now? Because there were guys in my house. There were men in my house who had masks on their faces. I don't know who they are, and this is not okay. So you see the difference? There's the general why now, but then there's the immediate right now. Like right now, I need to talk to you. So it tells you the level of urgency, right? So look at the situation. What are the facts on the ground? The other thing is, what am I trying to do? What is my speech trying to accomplish? You need to know this because otherwise it's just gonna be a bunch of words, fancy poetry that you're saying. What am I trying to do? So for me, Portia, it's pretty straightforward. Tell me the secret. I need you to tell me the secret, okay? I need Brutus to tell me the secret. So how am I gonna do that? I got lots of options. I got lots of tactics, right? I can flirt with him a little, be sweet. I can be direct. I can threaten. I've got all kinds of things. We call those tactics, right? So what am I trying to do? But the really important part of this, I think, is when you're trying to accomplish something, you have to always be checking in to see if you're succeeding. Is it going well? Is it working what I'm doing? So this is the last part. Am I succeeding? Am I getting what I want? So if I'm trying to get Brutus to tell me what I need to hear, to tell me the secret, this thing that's weighing on him, then I need to look and see if he's going to tell me. How do I know that? I look at his face. I listen to his voice. I look at his body language. So you've always got to be checking in, even in a soliloquy, even with an audience, if you're just talking to nobody, like Hamlet does a lot of stuff to nobody. But he's talking to the audience or he's talking to himself, right? So you got to be checking in and listening. So I like to always ask myself, what am I listening for and what am I looking for? So I'm looking for signs that my husband's going to say yes and tell me the secret. And if he's not, then I have two choices: tactic change or double down. So tactic change is I'm going to try another whole way of being. I'm going to maybe, if I'm trying to charm him and be sweet, then I'm going to go for a little more upfront, a little more, throw something in his face a little bit, right? Double down is I'm going to do more. So if I'm angry with him, I'm going to be more angry. I'm going to threaten, right? I'm going to double down. So you got two choices. So one more time, I'm going to reiterate. Under the why am I saying it? Who am I talking to? Why right now? What am I trying to do? And am I succeeding? Okay, all of those things. And I think something really important to remember, our human bodies are not comfortable unless we know what we're doing and where we are. So think about when you walk into a strange place, like when you walk into school, the first class, it's like, where am I? Who are these people? I don't know what to do. Should I just listen? Should I take notes? Should I type in my computer? Should I be on my phone? Should I silence my phone? Right? And here's the thing, as an actor, if you don't know what you're doing or where you are, your body will do something and make up the story about where it is. And usually what it does is, I'm nervous and I'm going to move. And then the other thing it says is, I'm doing a monologue and I hope they like me and I hope I do it well. Well, that's not what you're doing. I am Portia and I'm talking to my husband, Brutus. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to get him to tell me the secret. And the other thing is, I'm in my house. So this is the last bit here. Well, not the last bit, but the last bit of this section. Where are you? You need to know where you are. So it's nighttime. So maybe, you know, like I could turn off the lights, make it a little dimmer, right? Where am I? I'm in my house. We're outside. We're on like kind of a veranda. What's in front of me? What am I looking at? It's our orchard. I see trees, right? What am I directly looking at? I'm looking at my husband. He's got his shirt kind of open, which he doesn't do. He doesn't walk around like that. He's got this furrowed brow. He's brooding. He's thinking. Really look at that. So right now I'm in a Zoom box, right? So all I have to look at, I don't have another person to look at. So all I've got is this little camera, right? My little camera up there I'm looking at. But I have to look at something real. I have to make it real for myself, because I'm telling you, if you don't make it real, your body's going to do this. So when I'm doing self-tapes, I make a little face. I make this little silly face and I tape it up on my camera so that I'm not looking at a little dot. I'm looking at like a little face, right? Now, maybe you could draw a better picture than that. This is as good as I could do, right? So you want to do that. Okay. So another thing I want to suggest is that you really create the visual objects. So not just the person you're talking to, but what's in your visual field. So for right now, I'm sitting on camera. Now you guys are going to be eventually doing these things in the theater. So you have to imagine this world in front of you. Where's the veranda? Where's the line? How far does it drop down? What are the trees in front of you? We call that the fourth wall. You need to make it real. If you don't make it real, your body's not going to respond like it's in a real place. So I have this blue cup, right? I showed you guys real quick. So this blue cup, I can give this meaning. This is how I give it meaning. Now, this is a modern cup, and now I'm supposed to be in ancient Rome, but I want to give it meaning for me and Brutus. So I'm going to say this cup is something he gave me. We were out walking and I was out of breath and I got kind of dehydrated. And so he got me this little cup and he's like, I'm going to give you this so you don't get dehydrated. So you always have water. So you see what I've done? I've given this object meaning. So it means something between my husband and me. So every time my eye catches it, that's an expression of his love to me and that I received that love. You see that? And so now the other thing in this monologue is there are men who've been here. So I should know where they came from. Where's the outside door? So I'm going to put in my visual field, I can see my television. I'm going to make my television. That's the door those men came in. They were there. I heard them, I saw them, and that's the front door. That's where they came from, into my house. So you see already when I look there, that means something. They were in our house late at night. Not okay. Right? Makes sense? Okay, so really make sure you build your environment. Now, sometimes in a play, you have to make it imaginary, and that's hard. You got to talk to nobody. That's hard. Sometimes you can use a real thing. Like when I'm doing self-tapes now, because we're doing so many of them, I put objects in front of me. A lot of times I'll put something in my hand, something comforting, maybe a pen or a pencil. Just have it down here in my hand so I'm grounded. Or like I'm wearing a little dress, the edge of my skirt, maybe I'll hold that. So again, objects, you're a real human and you need to be in a real space, right? Okay, so that's environment. That was the where am I saying it? So I did why am I saying it? Where am I saying it? Last thing, freedom. You want to be able to just do the monologue. You want to be able to do it as if you're just saying it and speaking it. So that means you got to memorize it. You got to memorize it and memorize it and memorize it. But here's the thing. There's a part of our brain that memorizes words. You got to get this thing to be memorized back here. And the way memory moves from here to back here is with our senses and with meaning. So I remember things from my past because it's connected to a story. That's why, like I gave this cup meaning, I gave my TV meaning. It means a door where people came in. My husband is in front of me. He's a little face on my camera, right? So you need to give everything meaning and then you'll remember it. So if I just say, is Brutus sick? I'm not going to remember that. But Brutus, my husband, I'll tell myself a little story of how we got married. What was my wedding like? And is Brutus sick? He's never sick. He's never sick. So this is a big deal. He's sick. So see how I'm doing this? And is it physical? Is it healthy to walk unbraced? He's never not looking nice. And suck up the humors of the dank morning. The air is creepy right now. It's weird air. You see what I'm doing? I'm making a memory. So the memorization of my words is not just here, it's back here. I can recall it, okay? So that's how you do that in your head. So I always do my lines when I'm trying to memorize. I do stuff, I do actions. So again, if I'm trying to if this monologue is about me convincing my husband to tell me a secret, that's an action. I'm trying to do something. So I'll do my monologue while I'm making my bed. I want my bed to look neat. I want my husband to tell me a story. So I'll do it while I'm making my bed, like trying to get it perfect. And so my body's in the action of it, right? And then here's the other thing, 2 last things. I like to find one gesture that gets me into my character. So think of a body gesture you can do that tells you you're Portia. So for me, Portia loves him so much. So I do this for Portia. So I'm going to hit my mic. Sorry about that. Portia is this to me. So before I go on as Portia, before I do the monologue, I do this in my body to ground myself, to center myself. And this says to me, I'm not Anne, I am Anne plus Portia. Right? You're never not yourself. You're yourself in the character. I am Anne and Portia. And Portia. It's her heart. She's speaking from her heart to Brutus. And then the very last thing about the whole freedom part gives me freedom to do the monologue. So the gesture, one gesture, and whom for? Who am I doing this for? My acting teacher told me you can never do it for yourself because then you're worried about how you look. You're worried about are you doing it right? You're worried about are they going to like you? You're worried about whatever your day is like. Oh my gosh, I still have to study for that test, or my friend said that weird thing to me. Are they okay? I'm doing it for someone else. So what I like to think of is who doesn't have a voice in my society that I'm giving a voice to. So for Portia, I think about all the women, the wives, whose husbands or wives are doing something that's scaring them or making them nervous, and they don't have the courage to speak up. You know what that's like, right? When a friend of yours, or maybe your parents, maybe they're arguing, or maybe your best friend has stopped texting you and something's wrong and you just don't have the courage to say it. Or you do. But nobody's writing a play about that, right? No one's writing a play about a wife or a husband that spoke up to their spouse and said, hey, you're freaking me out. And so I do it for all those people that are in the situation the character's in, that don't have plays written about them, that don't have movies made about them. And that helps get me out of me and reminds me that as an actor, I am a window to the story and the character. I'm not a painting. I'm not something static. Look at my performance. You're supposed to look through me as an actor, right? Yeah. Okay, so that was a lot. That was a lot of information. I hope it works, and I hope you can play this over and over again. But these are my steps. Text, action, freedom. And remember, a text without a context is a sure sign you're being conned. And you don't want to con your audience. And they know. If you don't know what you're doing or saying or where you are, they know. And they just very subtly kick back. They're like, Shakespeare monologue. I want to be invested in the story. All right, so now I'm going to do this monologue for you. I want to let you know I've done this monologue for years. I've been doing this monologue for over 20 years. So it's in my body, it's in my heart, it's in my mind. I know it. I'm still pulling my little sheet out just in case. So don't expect yourself to be like a genius right away. Don't expect yourself to be so easy with it right away, right? You want to take your time with it. It's going to come slowly, especially if you're not used to Shakespeare. Okay, so I'm going to do this for you, and then I'm going to sign off. Let's see if I can do it well. Never know, right? Could be having a bad day. All right, so what I'm going to do, build my environment, right? They're the guys that came in. That's our front door. Here's my husband. Here's that little cup that he gave me as a present. And I'm going to do my gesture. Is Brutus sick? And is it physical to walk unbraced and suck up the humors of the dank morning? What, is Brutus sick? And will he steal out of his wholesome bed to dare the vile contagion of the night and tempt the roomy and unpurged air to add unto his sickness? No, my Brutus. You have some sick offense within your mind, which by the right and virtue of my place I ought to know of. And upon my knees, I charm you by my once commended beauty, by all your vows of love, and that great vow which did incorporate and make us one, that you unfold to me yourself, your half. Why, you are heavy. And what men tonight have had resort to you? For here have been some 6 or 7 who did hide their faces even from darkness. That was different for me. That was different. I haven't always done it like that. And so, for example, I didn't use the cup, but it was there for me, and I knew it. So I hope this has helped. I hope this gives you a way into Shakespeare and lets you know that it really is an adventure. And the more you dig in, the more gifts you're given, the more you will discover. And I hope that you think of it as like a great dance floor, like you're building a really amazing, solid dance floor. and that you get to dance on it, whatever dance you want, whatever speaks to you, whatever inspires you. You got to build that floor. You got to make sure it's really solid. You got to have good shoes, right? Good dance shoes. But after that, it's what lights you up. And I hope this lights you up. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for taking time. Thanks for indulging my very casual surroundings. And I hope this helps. All right, take care, y'all. Once again, my name's Ann Noble. I'm with the Antias Theater Company. And stay safe, everyone. Cheers.